Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is at war after Palestinian militant Islamist organization Hamas launches a massive surprise attack. Hamas's armed wing says it has fired more than 5,000 rockets into Israel from Gaza. Israel's army says armed militants have also infiltrated Israeli territory, with pictures apparently showing Palestinian militant Islamist fighters with a destroyed Israeli tank close to the border in the south of the Gaza Strip. According to Israeli media, several people have been killed, while dozens more have been wounded. Israel's military is striking targets in Gaza in response. Now, as mentioned earlier, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement as part of a televised address in response to the attacks. We have more of that for you now.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not in an operation, but at war. This morning, Hamas launched a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel and its citizens. We have been in this since the early morning hours. I convened the heads of the security establishment and ordered, first of all, to clear out the communities that have been infiltrated by terrorists. This currently is being carried out. At the same time, I have ordered an extensive mobilization of the reserves and that we return fire of a magnitude that the enemy has not known. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price. In the meantime, I call on the citizens of Israel to strictly adhere to the directives of the IDF and Home Front Command. We are at war and we will win it.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there earlier in a televised speech. Let's bring in DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters, who is in Jerusalem. Rebecca, just hearing there Benjamin Netanyahu talking about a war here. What does this change for Israelis? How does this affect life in Jerusalem, where you are?
It's hard to know exactly how this is going to affect Israel going forward, Monica. This is a developing story. It has very much come as a surprise here in Israel this morning. It's not yet clear what the full retaliation will be, or in fact what the full attack is. There are fears, of course, that this is a coordinated attack with other groups, not just Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who are conducting the current attacks from Gaza at the moment and through the Gaza barrier into Israeli towns, but that there may, in fact, be also help or attacks from the northern border, from Lebanon, Hezbollah. It's really too early to predict just where this might go and what this might mean for Israel, for relations with Palestinians and all of that stuff. Here in Jerusalem this morning, the sirens have been sounding on and off. We have had a lull recently. We've been seeing in the sky the rockets coming all the way here from Gaza. Most of them have been intercepted by the Iron Dome. I'm hearing that some sirens are currently going off in other parts of the country as well, all throughout the south and the center of the country. Some have made landfall. We saw one in Tel Aviv hit an apartment building. One person has been killed there. In terms of other numbers, I can say that the health authorities have confirmed that at least 22 civilians, or 22 Israelis, I should say, have been killed in these attacks and what's going on around Gaza, the ground force, the ground attacks that are happening at the moment. That number is likely to rise. Some of the videos that we're seeing circulating from social media certainly show some pretty graphic scenes. We know from the IDF as well, they've confirmed that from the Israeli Defense Forces, I should say, or the Israeli military, that they are conducting ground operations and that there is fighting ongoing in at least 20 locations down around the Gaza Strip. So this is very much a developing situation, and certainly something that this country really hasn't seen at all, not coming from Gaza. This is an unprecedented attack, and as I say, caught Israel by surprise.
Right. Rebecca, also because we can see when we see you, we can see the life right behind you, still ongoing, obviously, on a beautiful sunny day. But when the Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned that the citizens of Israel should adhere to the guidelines that are giving, just wondering, has anybody been told to stay indoors, to take shelter, or is life at the moment, at least, going on as usual?
Well, I would say that nothing today is as usual here, Monica. For an 80-kilometre radius around the Gaza Strip, there has been a state of emergency declared. People there certainly not going about their lives as normal. Behind me, you can see, of course, traffic. Jerusalem is still relatively far away. It's relatively spared. There is a lot of, I would say, hope and people really believe in the Iron Dome, and we've seen interceptions happening here. This morning, you can see them in the sky as the rockets come from Gaza and they're intercepted by the dome, so most people do feel relatively protected. But when I was leaving my house this morning, I spoke to some neighbours who were leaving. In that area, there are no bomb shelters. That's an old part of the neighbourhood. And before bomb shelters were mandated, people going to find secure places to stay. People are worried. As you walk through the city, you see a much heightened police presence, especially around the old city, the holy sites, where people are, the security services are obviously feeling that there may be further attacks or attempts at things going on here. But apart from that, most of the life does appear to be normal behind me. Although something that has happened as well today is that it is Shabbat. So most observant Jews are not listening to the media. They're not using their phones, etc. They have actually been urged to turn on their radios, to break Shabbat and to listen to what is being asked of them, to get advice from the government. So things definitely not going on as normal here today, and not likely to be going on in any kind of normality in the coming days and potentially weeks, Monica.
Right. Well, Rebecca Ritters there reporting for us from Jerusalem there. Rebecca, thank you so much for that. We can now talk to journalist Hasim Balusha, who is joining me from Gaza on the phone. Hasim, good to have you back. Do tell us a bit about the situation in Gaza, especially after Israel has launched missiles in response to Hamas's attacks this morning.
Yes, there were several Israeli strikes targeted different buildings in Gaza, some of them like private buildings, some according to the Minister of Health, one hospital was targeted, public places as well. There is no official number on the casualties. There is a lot of numbers circulating on social media, but still not official. The official number so far is one Palestinian killed and some injured in the airstrike that targeted the public hospital in the northern Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, we still hear some rockets are fired from Gaza in the last half an hour, and ambulances, sirens are heard in I don't know if you can hear it in the background as well. As well as we hear some of the Israeli airstrikes, bombardment across Gaza Strip.
Now, would you say that the citizens of Gaza were prepared for what was about to happen? Were they taken by surprise? How are they reacting to what's happening now?
Well, this is a surprise thing. As long as it's for the Israeli side, it's for Gaza side. Nobody predicted this. There was no talk about it or any sign of any escalation on the ground. The morning was normal. People were prepared to go, especially students, to the schools. It was a school day. Well, later was cancelled. But it was a surprise, especially that it came like a huge number of rockets were fired and people got up in the early hours of the morning on the sound of rockets fired from Gaza and the Hamas militants attacking and infiltrating in the Israeli communities behind the borders. People are divided. Majority ordinary people are rushed to the bakeries and grocery shops to bag supplies and to get as much as possible supplies, because of course people would expect this would be very long. It's not the first time Gaza experienced 4 wars before over the 15 years. Plus unlimited number of escalations and confrontations between Gaza factions and Israeli army. Still, it's still unclear. People are not don't understand what's going to happen, what's going on. Still, people in shock.
Right. Well, yeah, everybody is still trying to assess the situation and find an answer to that particular question. Hassim Balusha, a journalist, there reporting from Gaza for us. Hassim, thank you so much. Talking about assessment, let's now talk to a political analyst and fellow at the Century Foundation, Dalia Schendlin. Dalia, Israel seems to have been taken off guard. That's what we've heard. How is that possible? So I'm not quite sure. Can you hear me, Dalia?
I don't know how this operation could have happened. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, no, we seem to have some technical difficulties, but just keep going.
Hear me?
Yep.
I don't know exactly how this operation could have been planned, which was certainly a very long-term planning and a very elaborate plan based on quite significant intelligence on the part of the people who did this, the Hamas. We don't actually know yet, and I don't think we will know for some time, at least for another few days, months, or years, exactly how this happened. But there could be no surprise that there would be escalations simply based on what has happened over the last decade of wars with Gaza, but more. I mean, Gaza has been under a siege for essentially 16 years, and there have been various rounds of violence ever since, but particularly since 2009, we've had 5 or 6 such rounds of escalation, depending on how you count, some of them very recently. There was no question there would be another one, but this particular form, the timing, and the type of attack has really caught everybody by surprise, particularly the fact that it is a matter of breaking through the wall, a ground incursion, what we're seeing, videos of people parachuting in, alongside rocket fire. That kind of coordinated attack was not anticipated as far as we know at this point.
Now, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel was at war and that, quote, the enemy will pay an unprecedented price. So do help us to understand the extent of these attacks on Israel and what he means by that.
Well, the extent of the attacks is not yet known. It's still going on, and we can only anticipate. I think there's a very high likelihood of further escalation beyond Hamas. So whatever Hamas has planned for this particular attack, we're already seeing a chain reaction of escalating violence among individuals, clashes, in Jerusalem and around settlements. But the real question is whether other factions will get involved. There is a high likelihood. We've already seen statements from Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah weighing in on this, and that has been the Israeli nightmare of the security establishment for most of this year, that we would see a multi-front war, or at least that there would be escalations on those different fronts, whether or not they were coordinated. If that happens, then certainly the attack will be unprecedented, and the response too. What kind of response we are likely to see? We know from precedent that the first thing that will surely happen is, massive aerial bombardment of Gaza. I have no question that that will happen. It will cause vast devastation in Gaza, which is already devastated by all the previous rounds. I can only assume there will be targeted assassinations of top leadership of Hamas. And beyond that, we could see ground incursion into Gaza, as we've seen in some of the previous rounds of fighting. It's all unknown. Beyond that, there may be forms of escalation that we simply can't anticipate at this point.
Right. Dalia Schendlin, there, a political analyst and fellow at the Century Foundation. Thank you so much for that.